He stood in his own driveway in Dallas, Texas, and laughed at my car in front of 6 people. He had no idea the sticker on his bumper carried my name, or that the 3 payments he hadn't made were sitting in my files. Jonathan Hayes, 58, had spent nearly 3 decades building Hayes Auto Group in Dallas, Texas. He wasn't a man who sought attention. If you walked into his dealership on a Tuesday afternoon, you'd likely find him in the back office, eating a turkey sandwich and arguing mildly with his accountant about inventory numbers. He looked more like a clerk than the owner of 3 thriving lots. That was fine with him. He believed in substance over show. His wife, Linda, had been his anchor for 31 years. A music teacher at the local elementary school, she had strong opinions about tuning that Jonathan never fully understood, but always respected. Every Friday, they ate at the same Italian restaurant. Linda ordered the same dish every time, and Jonathan pretended to study the menu, though he already knew what he'd order. Their daughter, Emily, had married Ryan Mitchell 4 years earlier. At the wedding, Jonathan thought Ryan was decent enough. That was the last time he fully liked him. Ryan was 45, worked in financial services, and drove a silver Audi Q8. He treated his driveway in Plano like a stage, showing off the car more often than most people mention their children. He wasn't evil, but he had a need to feel ahead of everyone in the room. When he couldn't, he manufactured it. The first crack appeared at Emily's birthday dinner. Jonathan drove his 2011 Buick LeSabre, 190,000 miles, dent above the rear wheel well. He loved that car. Linda had picked the color. Ryan looked at it and said, "Dad, you really have to treat yourself." He said it loud enough for the neighbor to hear. Jonathan replied calmly, "I like the Buick." Ryan smiled, the smile of a man who thought he'd lost a small argument but won a larger one. At Christmas, Ryan did it again. "Ever think about leasing something newer?" he asked in front of Linda's sister. "Dallas has great dealerships." Jonathan said, "Yes, I've heard that." Linda raised one eyebrow exactly 1 centimeter, her way of saying don't give him the satisfaction. Then came the Sunday in March. Emily and Ryan hosted lunch. Ryan parked the Audi in the driveway and left Jonathan's Buick on the street. Jonathan didn't mind until Ryan's neighbors, the Ferriers, came over. Ryan gave them a tour of the Audi, bragging about the sound system, adaptive suspension, financing terms as if they were personal achievements. Then he looked at Jonathan's Buick and laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, confident laugh. "That's my father-in-law's car," he said. "I keep offering to take him to a dealership, but the old man won't listen." 6 people stood there. Emily was inside. Jonathan smiled. "The Buicks never let me down," he said. Ryan shrugged and kept talking. But Jonathan noticed the sticker on the Audi, Hayes Auto Group, Dallas. His dealership. His name. That night, Jonathan pulled the sales records. Ryan Mitchell. Financed November 14th, 2 years prior. 1 silver Audi Q8. 48-month term. 11 weeks and 3 payments behind. Jonathan sat with that for a long time. The next morning, Jonathan Hayes sat at his kitchen table, staring at the Buick parked outside. The car had never let him down, but the laughter from Ryan Mitchell still echoed in his ears. He picked up the phone and called his oldest friend, Marcus Green, a retired civil engineer. Marcus answered on the second ring, the way he always did, as if he had been waiting for the call. Jonathan told him everything: the driveway, the Ferriers, the laugh, the finance file. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "So he laughed at the sign on the back of his own car?" Jonathan said yes. Marcus sighed, the kind of sigh that carried both amusement and warning. "Be careful. Emily's in the middle of this. But you can't let a man do that to you in front of witnesses and just walk away. The question is, what kind of man do you want to be when you do this?" That question stayed with Jonathan all day. The following week, Jonathan called his lawyer, Rachel Fong. She had been handling his business affairs for 11 years. Rachel was precise, kind, and ruthless when necessary. She listened without interrupting, one of her best qualities. When Jonathan finished explaining, she asked, "Jonathan, are you looking for legal remedies or justice?" Jonathan said, "Both." Rachel leaned back in her chair. We'll send a standard arrears notice and schedule a formal account review. You're well within policy. Jonathan nodded. Schedule it 6 weeks from now. Rachel said, that gives you time. Jonathan replied, that's exactly what I need. Then she added, don't do this at a family dinner. Jonathan smiled faintly. Of course not. He absolutely did it at a family dinner. It was a Sunday in late April. The air was warm, and Linda's roast filled the house with the kind of smell that usually meant comfort. But Jonathan knew tonight would be different. Emily and Ryan arrived just after 6. Ryan parked the Audi in Jonathan's driveway, bold, deliberate. He walked in smiling, talking about a conference in Toronto, his voice carrying the tone of a man who wanted credit for noticing details. He complimented the roast, praised the seasoning, and laughed too loudly at his own jokes. Dinner moved smoothly at first. Emily chatted with Linda. Ryan filled the silence with stories about colleagues and investments. Jonathan listened, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew what sat inside the blue manila folder on the counter. He had rehearsed this moment in his head for weeks. After the main course, Jonathan stood. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp enough to make Emily glance up. He walked to the counter, picked up the folder, and returned to the table. Ryan's smile faltered. He looked at the folder the way a man looks at a letter he doesn't want to open. Jonathan sat down slowly, placed the folder in front of him, and folded his hands. His voice was calm, deliberate. Ryan, I want to talk to you about your vehicle account. Ryan blinked. My what? Your Audi. The Q8. Financed November 14th through Hayes Auto Group. The words landed like a hammer. Ryan froze. Emily's fork hovered in midair before she set it down carefully. She looked at her father, then at her husband. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. We've been patient because you're family. But at this point, the account is officially under review. Ryan's face drained of color. He whispered, I didn't know that was your dealership. Jonathan's eyes didn't leave his. I know you didn't. The silence that followed was thick, pressing down on the table like a weight. Even Linda, who had been quietly sipping her wine, set her glass down and folded her hands. Ryan cleared his throat. I was going to catch up on the payments. Jonathan nodded once. I believe you. That's why we're having this conversation here instead of by registered mail. His tone was steady, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. Emily's voice broke the silence. Dad, how long have you known? Jonathan turned to her. 6 weeks. Her eyes widened. And you waited? I wanted to give Ryan the chance to come to me directly. He had my number. Ryan said nothing. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched under the table. Jonathan studied him for a long moment, then spoke again, softer but sharper. Ryan, you're a smart man. I think you understand the position you're in. I'd like you to think carefully about the kind of person you want to be going forward in all the ways that. Ryan's shoulders sagged. He nodded slowly, once, twice. It was the only thing he could do. Rachel Fong formalized the catch-up schedule the following Tuesday. The paperwork was precise, every clause airtight. Jonathan watched Ryan sign each page with a stiff hand, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding Jonathan's. Within 10 days, all 3 missed payments were made. The account was current again. But Jonathan knew the money wasn't the point. The point was the silence that followed. Ryan had been forced to face himself, not in a boardroom, not in front of neighbors, but at Jonathan's own dinner table, with Emily watching every word. Jonathan never raised the driveway incident again. He didn't need to. The weight of that silence had already done its work. Emily had her own conversation with Ryan afterward. Jonathan wasn't part of it, and he didn't ask. Linda later told him that whatever Emily said, Ryan came out of it looking like a man who had just met himself for the first time. His shoulders were heavier, his voice quieter, his arrogance dimmed. Linda thought that was useful. Jonathan agreed. The Buick still sat in Jonathan's driveway, its dent above the rear wheel well catching the sunlight. He had no plans for it. To him, it wasn't just a car, it was a reminder. A reminder that dignity isn't measured in chrome or horsepower, but in patience, restraint, and timing. 2 Sundays later, Jonathan and Linda drove to Galveston, Texas. The Gulf breeze carried salt and warmth, and they had lunch at a small restaurant on the main street where the salads always came overdressed. Jonathan never complained. He had learned that some battles weren't worth fighting. On the drive back, Linda was quiet in that comfortable way she had always been. She looked out at the water, then asked softly, "Do you feel better?" Jonathan thought about it honestly. "I think so," he said. "I didn't enjoy any of it." "I know," Linda replied. "I just wanted him to understand the full picture." "He does now." "Yes, he does." The car rolled along the highway, the Gulf fading behind them. Linda turned her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Jonathan, the Buick needs new wiper blades." Jonathan smiled faintly. "I know. You've been saying that since October. I'll do it this week." "You said that in October too." She wasn't wrong. That Tuesday, Jonathan bought the blades. They took 4 minutes to install. He stood in the driveway afterward, looking at the Buick, the same car Ryan had laughed at, the same car that had carried him through decades of life. He had no idea why he had waited 7 months to fix something so simple. But as he tightened the last blade into place, Jonathan realized something. Revenge hadn't been about humiliation or punishment. It had been about clarity. About showing Ryan and himself that respect is earned, not demanded. The Buick ticked softly as the sun set over Dallas. Jonathan wiped his hands, looked at the car, and whispered, "Still here." And he knew he wasn't just talking about the Buick.